name is Josh Burdick. I'm an account manager here at Marquee 360, and today we're going to be going over managing project financials. For those of you that may be new to these webinars, this is something that we do offer on a monthly basis. We cover a wide range of different topics. These are usually about an hour long. Try to keep it around lunchtime as well. If there's ever anything you'd like to cover that we do not have on the list, we highly encourage you to do so. Just let us know. We're always happy to add new things to our webinar series. Speaking of series, we have just started a new webcast series called the Solution 101 series. That is also held once a month. It is a 30-minute session. And what we've tried to do is set it up for maybe someone who is new to a certain application, or even to current users who are using applications but may not know all the features and functionalities that go along with them. So they could be a good refresher course or a good how-to course as well. And again, for those that are new to the webinar, I just wanted to introduce Marquee 360 really quickly. We are a Microsoft Gold partner. We have over 20 years of experience in the Microsoft platform. We focus on digital transformation using Microsoft 365 platform, be it Teams, Microsoft Work Management, Power Platform. Our job is really to extend the Microsoft solution to enable a better user experience for you. Since we've started, our focus has always been on customer success, which is why we are the trusted advisor. We help with platform implementations from start to finish, and we have support ongoing and post as well. We do not have a specific line of business as we are cross-industry. And in the Microsoft platform, the areas that we focus on are Microsoft Project, Microsoft Teams with Teams and Planner integration, Power BI reports and dashboards, Power Automate workflows, as well as Power Apps. Some of the services offered by Marquee 360 are consulting services, support services, as well as platform-specific workshops. We do offer prepackaged solutions as well, such as Project Intake app, Project Online to Teams, Teams Governance app, and Innovation Ready for Ideation. So again, thank you guys so much for showing up today. I'm going to pass this off to Neil so that we can get started for you all.
All right. Thanks, Josh. Josh, I always feel underdressed whenever I do a webinar with you because of your tuxedo.
I know that's about 4 years old.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. So what we're going to cover today is, how do you manage project financials? And there's actually several different ways to do this. Some of the ways are out of the box, which may or may not meet your needs. And then I'm also going to show how we can extend that using the Power Platform. We have a pre-built app called Financials 360 that I'll be showing you today that allows you to kind of take it to the next level and maybe tailor it a little bit more to your specific needs. I'm not sure if we have another slide or if I'm going right to a demo. What's the next slide? Yep. See, I knew that.
Going
right to the demo. So let me share my screen. And then here, what we're seeing is Project Online. So Project Online is one of Microsoft's platforms for project management. And it does support project financials as well. And then it really depends on the varying level of degree that you need to manage project financials. So for example, when I go into here, say I drill down into the Project Center, here I see all my different projects. As I go into a particular project, one of the things that you do need to consider is at what level of detail do you need to track your project financials, right? So for some customers, it might just be at the project level, and they're not really going to go any deeper than that. Even though it might be at the project level, though, what exactly is it that they have to track? So one of the ways we can do this with kind of the out-of-the-box functionality is, for example, here, if I go under the business case, this is called a project detail page. And in here, I could collect some basic, high-level financial information. So what's our total cost? What are our benefits? What's the proposed budget? It'll calculate ROI for me. If I hit edit here, you'll see that page in edit mode. And I can simply go in and put in, what the budget is, what the cost, what the benefits are, and then it'll calculate ROI. Again, very high level, very basic. The nice part about this, though, is as I record this information, it will bubble up into my different, reports and dashboards, right? So you can track it here, and then you can kind of take it up to that next level. But again, very simple way of tracking that. The other thing that you can do is utilize rates, resource rates, different resource types in order to manage the cost within the schedule itself. This is out of the box, but it tends to be complicated. We've seen a number of customers do this, and it really depends on the discipline and the skill sets of your project managers. It's either going to go really well, and they're very detail oriented, looking at that, or it could really blow up and you'll end up getting garbage in and garbage out. So what I simply mean by that is when I go into a schedule here, you will see, so for example, if I pivot around to some different views, you will see that there's some different cost views, there's some earned value views. So if you're trying to do earned value, that capability will be out of the box via the schedule. But if I go in here and I want to see, say, the cost for each task, when I go into here, I'll then be able to see what's the cost or the planned cost, what's the baseline, so we can snap baselines to basically record what our original planned financials would be. And it'll calculate cost variances, what's our actual cost, what's the remaining cost. Where this is all coming from, though, is based on the resource assignments to these tasks. So each resource can have its own rate. And then you can also have so that's for labor resources, but you can also have other resource types like materials or cost resources as well. So let me check this project in, and I'm going to open it up in Project Pro, and you get a little bit more detailed view of this. Now, some of this you can manage through the web interface, like I was just showing you, but I think if you're a PM and you really wanted to manage it through the schedule, you're better off opening it up in Project Pro because it'll give you a much better view, and it'll give you more tools to manage that information. Okay, so when I go into here, a couple of things. One is if I go to my resource sheet, you'll see here with the resources that each one has a standard rate and overtime rate. So this is coming from the Enterprise Resource Pool in Project Online. And when I assign resources to a task, it'll take the number of hours on that task times whatever the standard rate is, and that'll calculate the cost for that particular task. Now, these are all work resources, so work resources are basically labor, but you could also add other resource types. So for example, if I go into here, build team from the enterprise, this will open up the resource pool. And if I go through here, you'll see generic resources, but you can also see cost resources. So if I go into here, all right, I'm not seeing the field that I want, so let me just jump back over here real quick. So if I go into the resource pool here, if we look at resources, so we have work resources, which are labor, but you can also have cost resources. So a cost resource is where you assign a resource to your project, you assign them to a task, and then you can simply type in whatever cost is attributed to that. It's not going to calculate it based on number of hours in that task or what the rate is of that resource. Cost resources are typically used for things like travel expenses, hardware, software, different types of things that you would be buying as part of a project, but they're not necessarily being consumed and they're not being scheduled like labor resources. You can also have material resources. So with material resources, that's more along the lines of things that will get consumed on a project. So you can see here I have cabling. So with cabling, how many feet of cable do I need? I can multiply that by the per use rate, and then that'll tell me what my overall material costs are going to be on the project. Okay, so all this can be set up in the resource pool so that when you're building out your project schedule, you can go ahead and add these resources. So for example, these are those cost resources. So let's say I want to add one of these. And when I hit OK, you can see it's now a cost resource. And the way you would use this is if I go into my project, and let's say I have a particular task where that cost resource is going to be utilized, I can go into here, pick that cost resource, and as you can see here, this is being calculated based on, that's a work resource based on the labor, the number of hours we need, and whatever the rate is. But with this, I can just simply go into here and say, well, this is going to cost us, $55,000. Okay, so if you have an invoice or an SOW, you can just go ahead and incorporate that into here. And that's pretty nice. The other thing you can do here too is if you switch to a time-phased view. So for example, your task usage view and your resource usage view are time-phased views. When you go into here, you could set up this view where maybe I want to look at it based on years and months. You could also set up a specific view for the budgeting here. And then I don't want to see labor, I want to see cost and actual cost. So when I go into here and I scroll to a particular area, now I can start to see what are we spending each month on that particular resource, on that particular task. And it's rolling it all the way up. So if I go all the way up here to my project summary task, now I can see what's the amount of cost, dollars that we're spending each month based on the tasks, the resources assigned, whether they're labor resources or cost resources or material resources. Okay. And again, all this information would flow into your Power BI reporting. So this is an out-of-the-box capability. If you want to see this view, you have to use Project Pro. You can't use the web view for this. And it is pretty nice. The only downside with this is it can be complicated. So as you can imagine, it's one thing when you set up your project schedule, but once the project starts executing, things start to change, things start to get rearranged, things start moving around. Well, these costs are also going to move around. And that's good on the one hand because it should be reflecting exactly what's happening in your schedule. But on the other hand, if the project managers aren't keeping their project up to date, or maybe they're just not that skilled in managing the project and rescheduling unfinished work, things like that, all their costs are going to stay in that original state of the schedule. So your budget report all of a sudden might not be 100% accurate. Okay, so what I just showed you were a couple different ways that are more of the out-of-the-box ways. We can keep them in enterprise custom fields at the project level. We could also do a more detailed, financial project financials within the project schedule. That gets more complicated. Sometimes it's hard to support that, but it definitely is doable. But sometimes what we run into is customers want something that's kind of in between, right? So one of the things that we can do is, let me check this back in. One of the things that we do is we will leverage Power Apps. So Power Apps is part of the Microsoft Power Platform, and we build a specific app in order to do cost tracking, and really depends on the level of detail that you want. But at a minimum, you can track your budget, your forecast, your actuals. But you could also track things like purchase orders, invoices. Again, it can be tailored to the level of detail that you're looking for. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to go back to the project center here. And by the way, so what I'm about to show you, I have integrated with Project Online, but this could also be integrated with other scheduling tools as well. So if you're using, Project for the Web, Azure DevOps, Jira, Smartsheets, we could incorporate the same Power App into those other scheduling tools. But what I'm going to do here is just drill down into the Project Center, and I'm going to go down to a particular project. So I have this Azure DevOps implementation. And with this project, let me switch the view here. You can see we have a project schedule built out. It's been baselined. Progress has already started, so you can see a bunch of tasks have already been completed. And if I switch back to that cost view, you'll see some of the information is going to come from the project schedule as well, right? So we're still leveraging resource rates, labor rates, things like that. Now, and I'm doing this in particular because I want to show you how even with the Power App, we could pull this information in and have it populate the financial data in the Power App. That could be optional, but it's definitely something that you could do. So how do we get to the Power App, right? So there's a couple different ways. One is if I want to open up the project's financials, we added a button up here called the Financials 360 button. So when I click on this, I can go into here and it'll open up the details of that particular project. The other way is through the Power App itself, we could have more of a portfolio view. So here I can see all the project budgets and I can roll up what the information is. I could also see what's the scheduling tool for that. Is it Project Online, Project for the Web, Azure DevOps, and then whether or not we want to sync the financial actuals, which would be more like your invoices and things like that, have them roll up to the budget, or do we want to sync schedule actuals? So if I go back to this project, so you can see Azure DevOps implementation. In the Power App, we're going to show different information, right? So one thing is the General tab just has high-level information about the project itself. So we have the name. Is this going to be a capitalized project? We have some project budget summary. So we have what's the overall budget, what's the actuals, and what's the remaining budget. These are all calculated based on the information that's being entered into the budget, the forecast, the actuals. And then down below here, if you want to utilize a scheduling tool with this, which is optional, you could just use this standalone. What this allows me to do is go in, I could specify which scheduling tool. So I have several loaded here. In this case, I'm using Project Online. Do we want to capitalize the labor? That's more for the reporting. And then do we want to sync schedule actuals or do we want to sync financial actuals? If this is yes, what this means is I can use Power Automate to go to Project Online, get those, the task cost that we're calculating within the schedule, and then push it up into my financials here. If it's set to no, then manually I can just type in whatever I need to enter for my project, just like you would if you're managing like a spreadsheet. The sync financial actuals, if that's set to yes, that basically means is if I'm using this to track invoices. So as invoices are coming in and then I'm approving them, as soon as I approve that invoice, it updates the actuals in the budget as well. The invoices here, purchase orders, this is within the app managing that, but if you have an ERP system, we could also pull that information from there too. Okay, so that's all the general settings, just set the project up. Project team, I'm not going to use this because I'm using the Project Online schedule for this, but for example, with Project for the Web doesn't manage resource rates or anything like that. So I'd be able to pull in who the team members are on my Project for the Web project. I could give them an hourly rate and I could tag it to a financial line so it'll roll up into my budget. So let's talk about the budget. So when I get into the budget here you can see different financial lines. So we have labor. So each line's by fiscal year. So we have labor that we're going to capitalize. We have different expense types. This is going to be professional services. We also have some hardware, so network switches and cabling. We're going to capitalize that. That's only going to be in the 2021 fiscal year. And then down here, we have software subscriptions, which will be an operating expense, software category, again, 2021. And for the budget, we're now seeing exactly what do we think we're going to be spending on a monthly basis. And then over here, what's the total we're going to spend for that fiscal year. So with this particular grid, I can go in and I can just click in here, and then I could enter, whatever my values are going to be and build out my schedule that way. Okay, or build out my budget that way. And I can save this, and then this will flow up into whatever our reporting is. When I go to the forecast will be, all right, your project's now executing. If you want to keep a forecast of what you're going to be spending, going into the future. Same idea, any of these financial lines. So the financial lines will flow through to each of these areas. And again, just like a spreadsheet, you could just manually update the information. And then we have our actuals. Now you'll notice on my labor, they're all zeros right now, right? And that's because with this project, I actually want to synchronize this with the project schedule. So to do that, I have a Power Automate flow. Come on. You refresh this. There it is. So it's sync schedule actuals to the financial lines. So what this will do is several things. One is it will pull in the baseline. So if you've baselined your project, it'll pull in the baseline. That's what will go to the budget line. If you have any actuals, they'll go to actuals, obviously. And then anything that's remaining will go to the forecast. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And I'm going to go ahead and run it. Now, I'm doing this, obviously for a demo purpose, just manually, but this could run as a nightly job. So it'd be completely hands-off. It would just update your information on a nightly basis. Okay, so now when I go back to the budget here, you can see it's now populated those costs from the project schedule that's calculated based on number of hours, the resource rates, everything that Project Online's doing. So this is your baseline values. If I go under the forecast, this is the remaining. And then under actuals, you have your actuals. So maybe they're coming in from timesheets. They're then updating the project schedule and calculating what those values are. Okay. Now, if I need to add another line into here, I can just click on New Financial Line. And I have a form here. So let's say, we're going to have some travel expenses. It's going to be an operating cost. And then we have our different expense type categories. So it's going to be travel. So now I have that line item in here, and I can start tracking what those expenses are going to be. Okay. So up to this point, this is kind of, the main, just tracking your financials for your project, what your budget was, what your actuals are, what your spend's going to be. But we could also extend this to track other things, right? So if we want to track purchase requisitions, we can go into here, start entering in purchase request, and then what POs are related to that purchase request. So as I get into the more detail here, we could track, who the vendor is, what's the amount, where did the quote come from? So was it an SOW or an RFP? And then also we could do things like when was it placed in service? So if you're trying to track when you can capitalize that particular cost, we can track that as well. And then we have purchase orders. So if I drill down into a purchase order, here I have the purchase order number, which purchase request is it tied back to, which project is it tied back to, what's the amount of the PO, what's our actual spend, and then here you can see what's your remaining balance. So this actual spend is as you're entering different invoices and what their amounts are, it's then calculating what the actual spend is. And then it tells you what the remaining balance is. So down here, I can see all the invoices that have come in, and are they currently approved, or have they just been submitted, or if they've been rejected. If I want to enter a new invoice, I could just click new invoice, give it a number. What's the amount? What's the invoice date? And then when did I approve it? Again, this could also have a Power Automate approval flow in the background if you want. Right now, I just have it all manual. And then what's the current state? So has it been submitted, approved, rejected? So I'll just leave this one on submitted. Actually, let me approve this one. And let's put this in, I know it's in the future, but let's put this in, we'll put it in March. I'm only doing this so you can kind of see how the sync of the financial actuals will roll up. So then we have a comment. This is probably what you put on all your invoice comments. And then here we can tag it back to one of those financial lines, right? So let's go to our travel expenses. So there you can see that item that got entered into here. So if I go back, and again, if I click on the invoices tab, it's that same view that I saw when I drilled down into the purchase orders. Now I'm seeing the overall invoices for this particular project. And then what will happen is in the background, there's a Power Automate flow running. So it's checking to see when are new invoices added, when have they been approved, and when they've been approved, it'll automatically come in and it'll update the line entry for actuals into here. And actually, I don't think I tagged it to I think it was this one. I didn't tag it to the project. So there it is. So we should see this update March as soon as it executes. I'll come back and check on this. So from a project manager's point of view, this is how you would manage the project data. If you want it to sync to the project schedule, that's optional. You don't necessarily have to do that. If you weren't syncing with the project schedule, you would simply go into here and enter in what that cost is going to be for that particular month. Okay. And that's what this option does. So if you switch that to no, then it's not going to sync with the project schedule. If you leave it on, it will. Same thing with the financial actuals. Right now, by me having it on, anytime I enter in an invoice that gets approved, it'll update the appropriate financial line for that. But again, if you're using an ERP system, SAP, so forth and so on, we could also pull that in, those invoices in that way, and then that could update it. Okay, so when I have all this data in the system, this is for just one project. But let me switch over to the portfolio view of the Power App. So when I go into here, this is showing me more for like a portfolio manager or maybe an executive view. So I'm able to now see across all the projects, what's their budget, what are their actuals. I could also have the estimate to complete or the remaining forecast. I could also go in and see all the different purchase requests that have been submitted, all the purchase orders, and then all the invoices that are going through the system. Okay. But the real power of all this is how do I roll all this up, right? So when I go in, I'm going to use Power BI for this. So if I go down here, I have a dashboard for portfolio financials. So when I click on this, it's taking all that data that we've been entering in into the Power App, And now we're able to do reporting and analytics on it. So what this is showing you is just at the portfolio level, what's our total estimate to complete, what's our total budget, what's our spend so far, breaking it down by expense type, so we can see what our breakout is based on what we're spending money on, our invoice history. Down here, it's actually showing you what your cumulative budget, forecast, and actuals are, and then basically where the shading ends, that's today's date. So it's showing you up to the current period. And then over here, we have our CapEx, OpEx budget, and then same with our actuals for CapEx, OpEx. So again, this is at the portfolio view, but we could have filters off to the side here. So if I just want to focus in on one project, I can go ahead and click on that, and now I'm just seeing the information for that one particular project. All right. So again, it's taking that data that I was just showing you, and then we're going in and we're visualizing it. So this is the basic dashboard that we provide, but it is Power BI, so you can build and extend on that as needed. The financial details tab here takes it in, and now we can go in and look at it more from maybe what you're doing today in a spreadsheet. So if I want to focus in on a particular month or a couple different quarters, I can go in and do that. And now down below here, I can see capital or operating expense, which of those lines are below there, and then how much was budgeted, what was the forecast, what was the actual, what's the variance. So you can see in here, once I get into some negative variances, they're color coded to come up as red, just to highlight that there's a variance that particular time period. All right. So again, the nice thing about this versus managing all that in the project schedule, if you had to manage your hardware expenses, your software expenses, travel expenses, you could use cost resources, but it gets really cumbersome doing that in the project schedule. Whereas here, you can simply go in just like you would in Excel, enter in that information, but then we can trigger Power Automate flows to automate some of that. And then also, as you can see, pull it into Power BI for reporting purposes. Do we have any questions so far? Open up the floor. Everybody's speechless.
I have a question. Maybe it's going to be maybe very simple, but so I believe this solution, we can acquire this solution and then we can modify later on by from the perspective of the customer, or it's like in a box solution that is what we have, and we don't allow the customer to keep developing by their own.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this is a Power App, right? So if you're not familiar with the Power Platform from Microsoft, it's a no-code, low-code solution. I'm using air quotes. It's not that easy, but it does allow you to build applications, build automation flows, integration flows, without resorting to hardcore, coding. So, for example, with this particular Power App, you could purchase this and then modify it to your specific needs, or we would modify it for you. But the nice part about it is, since it's not any custom coding, it makes it a lot easier for you to support in the long run. You can kind of go in and see exactly what it's doing without needing to pull a developer in. And it is pretty extensible. Like I said, if I go back into my project here, here you can see the different tabs. If you don't want to use the purchase request, purchase orders, the invoices, that can simply be turned off, and then you could just manage, your budget, your forecast, and your actuals. So it's very easy to modify it, add additional fields, and then build Power Automate flows behind it to automate as much of your process as possible.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody have other questions?
Neil, the other question that came in was this can be an add-on later, right? It doesn't have to be configured up front when you do a project online or a project for the web implementation.
Correct. So think of this as like a separate, it can be a standalone app as well, right? So you don't need to necessarily even have the scheduling tool. It is a nice to have because we can synchronize with that. But it could either be used standalone, or if you're rolling out project online, you could do that for the first 6 months. And then when you feel you're ready to take it up a notch, you want to do more detailed project financials, get away from all the spreadsheets that you're using, then we can add it in at that point as well. So it's very easy to integrate it with Project Online or Project for the Web. And then, if you need any specific modifications or custom reports, we can handle that as well. Any other questions? All right, if there's no other questions, I think I'm done with the demo. So I'm going to hand it back to Erin and Josh.
Thanks, Neil.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone. We are going to be sending you guys a survey as well from this to fill out if there's anything that you'd like to cover more in depth that we didn't get to show you today in the time we had available. And then just general other questions as to if there's anything else that you're interested in that we can help with. And I believe Erin just posted that in the remarks section. But once again, thank you guys so much for coming. I will be following up with everyone with links to the recording. So if you have any teammates that haven't been able to see it, please feel free to share it with them as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.